وأن الله ربي وربكم فاعبدوه هذا صراط مستقيم وإن الله ربي وربكم فاعبدوه هذا صراط مستقيم.
Existence. No, may Allah have mercy upon you, that Allah the Exalted is existing eternally and everlastingly. So his existence, exalted is he, is not by the creating of a creator. One thing that you should notice when you go over the 13 attributes and when you teach others is that when you mention any one of the 13 attributes, you're going to have to mention another attribute. So what did we say here? Allah existed eternally and everlastingly. So right there we mentioned the attributes of qidam and baqa, eternality and everlastingness. So his existence, exalted is he, is not by the creating of a creator. Yani, he exists eternally without being created. His is the exalted existence. Some people have objected to saying Allah is mawjood, existent, because of it having the pattern dedicated for what receives the action, the maf'ul. If you listen to the pattern of the word mawjood, it fits the word or matches the word maf'ul, mawjood, maf'ul. So this pattern, maf'ul, this pattern, maf'ul, is for what receives an action. You say madrub, that means one who is struck, or ma'kul, eaten, or maqtul, killed, receives the action, this pattern. So Shaykh says, some people therefore objected to saying Allah is mawjood because it has the pattern of maf'ul. Mawjood means existent. Or in a very, very, very literal sense, mawjood means found. Found. So the verb is wajada. Wajada. To find. He found. The verb is wajada. Wajada. He found. Wajada. So the doer of such a verb is called wajid. Wajid. Finder. And then the receiver of such a verb would be called mawjood. Found. So it's valid to call Allah mawjood, and what it means is existent. Existence. Some scholars said the significance of this word is that the human being realizes Allah. That's what it means to say he's mawjood. One, by his mind, realizes that Allah exists. So some people objected to saying that Allah is mawjood because it has the pattern maf'ul. The response is that the pattern maf'ul may be used for what did not receive the action of another. Just as we say Allah is ma'bud, worshipped. Allah is ma'bud, worshipped. This doesn't mean that he's affected or received anyone's act. So it's not valid to say you can't use for Allah a word that has the pattern of maf'ul. That's not valid. Because then you wouldn't be able to say Allah is ma'bud, worshipped. And you wouldn't be able to say, Allah is madhkur, mentioned. Shaykh says the response is that the pattern maf'ul may be used for what did not receive the action of another. Just as we say, Allah is ma'bud, worshipped. They, those who said this wrong saying, thought of themselves as having a share in the discipline of the Arabic language, and they are not as they thought they were. Rather, they are delusional. The great linguist and explainer of Al-Qamus, Az-Zabidi, said in the explanation of Al-Ihya, the Creator, the Exalted, is mawjood. Thus, it is valid that he be seen. Don't forget to keep track of the books that you hear and take note of that. Either you have a notebook and you're taking notes, or you have a copy and you're reading along and you're writing notes in your margins, for example. The great linguist and explainer of Al-Qamus, Al-Qamus is a dictionary, Al-Qamus Al-Muhit by Fayruz Abadi, Al-Fayruz Abadi. Al-Qamus has an explainer. So basically, as Zabidi came to this dictionary, and it's a nice hefty dictionary, and he made that dictionary a matn, a bare text, and then he explained it. He explained the dictionary. He gave it a sharh. So as Zabidi, this linguist, he said in the explanation of Al-Ihya, what's Al-Ihya? Ihya'u Ulumiddin by Imam Al-Ghazali. Ihya'u Ulumiddin by Al-Ghazali. So this explainer of the dictionary is also an explainer of Al-Ghazali's book, Ihya'u Ulumiddin. Shaykh says that a person should not read an Ihya Ulumiddin if he doesn't have enough knowledge, because there are many fabricated and weak hadiths in there. Hundreds. That's what reached me. I didn't research it myself. So what did the linguist say? Someone who does have a share in the language and he's not delusional. He said, the Creator, the Exalted, is mawjood. Thus, it is valid that he be seen. Al-Fayyumi, the linguist and author of Al-Misbah, that's another dictionary, said mawjood is the opposite of ma'doom, non-existent or nothing. Mawjood is the opposite of ma'doom. So that's what the linguists said. And let's take a quick moment here for you to be able to properly place where evidence in the language is. Where's evidence in the Arabic language? Is it the case because these linguists said so, or what? So remember that the evidence for the Arabic language is the speech of the old Arabs. The pinnacle of that speech of old Arabs is the Quran. It was revealed according to the language of the Arabs, meaning the old Arabs. That's the highest level of Arabic language in every aspect. But the Mus'haf has its own script, though. The writing, it does have its own unique writing, the Mus'haf. The Mus'haf. Not one ayah or some Quran. I mean, an entire Mus'haf. There's a way to write it. And then after the Quran comes the speech of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But what that really means is what he said out of his own mouth, not what's narrated from him. Most of the hadiths are narrated by meaning. That's why the scholars didn't use lots of hadiths for evidence in the Arabic language. There are hadiths that they used as evidence, but there are many, many, many cases that they don't bring hadiths to prove those cases. Then after that comes the old Arabs themselves. And it was said that the last person whose language is evidence in the Arabic language is Imam Ash-Shafi'i. The last person whose language became or is evidence in the Arabic language is Imam Ash-Shafi'i. Imam Ahmed said that. So these authors of these dictionaries, they're not those. So where's the evidence in what they say? Here, the evidence is in their transmission of the language. It's not because they said it, but it's because they're approved transmitters of the language. Al-Qidam, eternality. Qidam, eternality, is necessary for Allah, meaning having no beginning, not meaning a long lapse of time. So I don't know in English a word that could mean ancient and could mean beginningless. One word that could have those two meanings. But in Arabic, there is a word that has both meanings. The meaning of beginninglessness, eternality, and the meaning of ancientness. The qidam is necessary for Allah, meaning having no beginning, not meaning a long lapse of time. The expressions qadim, that's an adjective, a descriptive name, qadim, so it means eternal for Allah, and azali means the same. If used for Allah, mean that there is no beginning for his existence. Thus, it is said, Allah is azali and Allah is qadim. If they were used for the creation, qidam and azal, they would mean extended lapse of time, ancientness. Allah the Exalted said about the moon, حَتَّى عَادَ كَالْعُرْجُونِ الْقَدِيمِ, until it returns back to the stage that resembles the qadim palm branch, the old palm branch, or aged palm branch. The author of Al-Qamus, not the explainer, Al-Fayruz Abadi, said, Al-Haramani bina'ani azaliyani bi Misr. The pyramids are two Azali buildings in Egypt. Ancient. So those are the attributes of Allah and the names of Allah concerning this attribute. And also Allah has another name which is Al-Awwal. So the attribute itself is Qidam, Al-Qidam, or Al-Azal, Al-Azal. And who is attributed with such an attribute would be called Qadim or Azali. And so those are his names and his attributes. And he also has the name Al-Awwal, the first. As for the evidence, here means the argument, the rational argument. The Burhan here means the rational argument. Of his eternality, exalted is he, it is that had he not been eternal, his being an occurrence would be necessary. Had he not been eternal, his being an occurrence, an event, a happening, something with a beginning, would be necessary. Why? Because existence is either with a beginning or without a beginning. So if he's not existing eternally, then Either he doesn't exist or he exists with a beginning. Then he would need someone to make him occur, which would lead to circular logic or infinite regression. And both are impossible. So circular logic, yani a circle, an irrational circle, an impossible or a beginningless circle, basically. It would lead to a beginningless circle. To say that God has a maker rationally leads to a beginningless circle or to a beginningless chain. One of those two. The only right belief about God's eternality is that he is one without beginning. Anything other than that leads to a beginningless circle, like to say A created B and B created A, or a beginningless chain, which would be to say A was created by B, and B was created by C, and C was created by D, and D was created by E, and then you keep going forever. That's the beginningless chain. So, a wrong belief in God's eternality leads to a beginningless circle or a beginningless chain. Or else one's just going to deny the existence of God. Even if he denied the existence of God, he's still going to fall into a beginningless circle or a beginningless chain. If he denies the existence of God, he would fall into a beginningless chain by believing, for example, that every day had a day before it. Every day was preceded by a day. Or by saying, for example, every moment was preceded by a moment. Every moment had another moment before it. That's a beginningless chain. Then he would need someone to make him occur, which would lead to circular logic or infinite regression, yani a beginningless circle or a beginningless chain, and both are impossible. Thus, it is established that his occurring, yani his having a beginning, it is established that that's impossible. Exalted is he, and his eternality is confirmed. Everlastingness. Everlastingness is necessary for Allah the Exalted, meaning that non-existence does not follow his existence. For once the necessity of his eternality is confirmed mentally, then everlastingness was necessary for him. What that means is, since he has no beginning, then it's necessary that he has no end. And we just proved that he has no beginning, so we are thereby proving that he has no end. We proved it by rational argumentation. This is because had it been possible that non-existence follows his existence, eternity would be inapplicable to him, because the eternal cannot be non-existent. The scholars have a rule, one of those rules that they made it rhyme. ما ثبت قدمه استحال عدمه. ما ثبت قدمه استحال عدمه. It means whatever is confirmed eternal, then its non-existence is impossible. Whatever is confirmed to be eternal, then its non-existence is impossible. And notice the way that's posed. ما ثبت قدمه استحال عدمه. Ma, that's a word of generality. Here's where someone might get confused, and you shouldn't. Ma, that's a word of generality, right? So, okay. What? Or whatever. So someone might say, how can we say that and Allah is the only one who exists without a beginning? How's that valid? The answer is that it's permissible to speak hypothetically. Or to say it in another way, it's permissible to speak for argument's sake. For argument's sake. So the argument is, if something, whatever it is, whatever it might be, if it's confirmed that this something has no beginning, then it's confirmed that that something could never be non-existent. that non-existence is inapplicable to that something. So that's an argument. So had it been possible that non-existence follows him, eternity would be inapplicable to him. Therefore, he is the one who is everlasting by himself. Exalted is he. There is none everlasting by himself but he. As for paradise and hell, their everlastingness is not intrinsic. It's not granted. Rather, it is because Allah willed everlastingness for them. Yani, I want to say it's not automatic, meaning granted. When I say automatic, I mean by the mind. Their everlastingness is not intrinsic. Rather, it is because Allah willed everlastingness for them. Meaning, He just willed for them to not stop existing. Hence, it is valid that paradise in and of itself would go out of existence. Likewise, hell, in reference to itself, it is valid that it would go out of existence. When we say in reference to itself and in of itself, that means without considering the religious texts, without considering the documentary evidence, and only considering the judgment of the mind, then yes, if it weren't for that documentary evidence, we would be able to mentally say, it would not be irrational to say that paradise and hell could come to an end. As-Sama', hearing. It is an eternal attribute confirmed for the self of Allah. He hears the sounds with an eternal, everlasting hearing, unlike our hearing. So it's not a sense, and it's not a power. Our hearing is a sense. That means it's a detector, and it's not. And our sense, our hearing, is a power. Allah's hearing is not a power. It is not by an ear or an ear canal, and so nothing escapes his hearing. Exalted is he, meaning no heard thing escapes his hearing, even if it were unclear for us or far from us, because that's irrelevant for Allah. How loud it is or where it is, that's irrelevant for Allah Ta'ala. Just as he knows without a heart, and he sees without eyes, and he speaks without a tongue or lips or air. The mental evidence for the necessity of his hearing is that had he not been attributed with hearing, he would be attributed with deafness because he's alive. It's very important, and we didn't get that a lot. Because he's alive. Yani, if he were not attributed with hearing, then either he would be deaf, or else he'd be inanimate, or else he would be inanimate, never having had life in the first place. So if he's inanimate, then he doesn't hear, but he's not deaf also. Either way, that's imperfection. And if he's alive, then he hears or he's deaf, because life has meaning. Being alive has a meaning. So if he's alive, then he hears or he's deaf. So if he doesn't hear, then he's deaf, which is deficiency, deafness, and deficiency is impossible for him. Whoever says that he hears with an ear has blasphemed. And here I'll remind you also something that the Shaykh did that the scholars do, which is the habit of the scholars, maybe not absolutely they would do, but their habit is to mention an argument all the way till the end of the argument and not to stop even if you can conclude the rest of the argument. So what did the Shaykh say? He said the mental evidence for the necessity of his hearing is that had he not been attributed with hearing, he would be attributed with deafness. He could have stopped there. It would be correct if he stopped there. But he kept going, which is deficiency for Allah. He could have even stopped there. But he kept going. And deficiency is impossible for him. And then he stopped. So usually the scholars don't suffice with the insinuation. when they're explaining sight. Sight is mentally necessary for Allah. Exalted is He. He, therefore, with an eternal, everlasting sight, sees all seen things. And He sees Himself without a pupil or organ, because senses are among the attributes of the creations. The mental evidence for the confirmation of His sight is that had He not been a seer, then He would have been blind, because He's alive. And blindness, i.e., lack of sight, is deficiency for Allah, the living, Al-Hayy. And deficiency for Him is impossible. The textual evidence for hearing and sight is verses and hadiths, like His saying, "May He be exalted, وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ." And He is the hearer, the seer. This here, I find it sufficient just to say the hearer, the seer. That's me personally. As well as the Prophet's saying, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when enumerating the perfect names of Allah, As-Sami'ul Basir, the hearer, the seer. This is in a hadith narrated by At-Tirmidhi and Ibn Hibban. If you haven't memorized the 99 names of Allah, memorize them. You could memorize that in a week or a little bit more, depending on how you break them apart. If you have 99 names, then you can split that evenly by 11. That's less than 2 weeks if you did 11 per day. This is in a hadith narrated by At-Tirmidhi and Ibn Hibban authenticated it.